Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I want to talk about how Evergrande has already defaulted on its debt, but the media seem to be covering it up. I also want to talk about the true squeeze potential of AMC and whether it can really hit 6 or 7 figures per share. So stay tuned and let's make some money. And now I want to dive straight in with the key information. So, before I start talking about Evergrande, I want to talk about our resident paper hand, Senator Pat Toomey. Now, you probably already know Senator Pat Toomey because he's the guy that's proposed a bill to stop the SEC from banning payment for order flow. But what you probably didn't know is that he actually bought some GameStop shares and then paper handed them. So you can see here that Pat Toomey bought between $1,000 and $15,000 worth of GameStop on the 27th of January. He then sold those shares on the 28th of January, the very next day. Now, it would be very interesting to know whether Pat Toomey paper-handed those shares after the buy button was removed and the GameStop price crashed. I wonder just how much money Pat Toomey lost or made on his trade of GameStop. Maybe that's why he's so angry and so upset with the apes, and he's trying to get the SEC to not ban payment for order flow, because he lost out on tons of money and wants to see us fail. Now let's talk about Evergrande and then I'll recap on AMC towards the end of the video. So, the media is lying about Evergrande. It's already bankrupt according to Dr. Marco Meltzer. Dr. Marco Meltzer says Evergrande missed second past due interest payment in a week and it's bankrupt and it could drag down real estate sector, HSBC, and the entire world financial system. This past Tuesday, I reported that Dr. Marco Meltzer, a former Fitch analyst and now DMSA, has announced that the past due interest payment on China Evergrande Group's offshore international bonds that all of Western media reported as supposedly paid by Evergrande could not be confirmed. Today, he is stating that a second interest payment of $47.5 million, allegedly made by Evergrande, according to Western media last night, has not actually been paid, once again contradicting mainstream media's reports. I also wanted to thank you guys massively. You've been loving the content recently and a lot of you have already signed up with Moomoo. Because of that, Moomoo have given me a special opportunity and I'm one of only 4 YouTubers to receive this opportunity because of you guys. Moomoo's new massive promotion gives you 3 free stocks when you sign up and deposit at least $100. You get a free stock worth up to $350, a second free stock with a guaranteed value of $54, and a third free stock of Neo with a guaranteed value of $39 on top of that, which is exclusive to my audience. You could always sell those shares and get 3 entirely free shares of AMC just for signing up and depositing at least $100. But you have to sign up quick as there's only 300 out of these 400 Neo shares left available. So we can see here from sources like The Guardian that Evergrande supposedly averted default with an interest payment. The Chinese property developer Evergrande has reportedly made an interest payment for an offshore bond before a grace period expired on Friday, narrowly averting a catastrophic default for the second time in a week. On Friday, Reuters, Bloomberg and the New York Times said sources with direct knowledge of the matter had confirmed the payment, but Evergrande did not respond to Reuters' request for comment. And also, Reuters was not able to determine the source of the funds used to make the interest payments either. But you've also got sources like Yahoo Finance and DMSA saying Evergrande technically defaulted, forcing HSBC and other international banks to write off $197 billion. Today, the grace period for overdue interest of $47.5 million on an offshore bond issued by the second largest real estate developer in China ended, but there has been no official confirmation of any payment of that interest by the close of business at Hong Kong banks. There are only unconfirmed media reports about an interest payment that is said to have been instructed today. However, Evergrande has not officially confirmed this payment, and neither have any of the Hong Kong banks. No wonder, for example, that a recent report in the Financial Times today doubts that the money has actually been paid to creditors. This is basically the same game as a week ago noted a DMSA senior analyst, Marco Meltzer. Marco, the DMSA senior analyst, actually inquired to those investors, but that did not bring any confirmation for the interest receipts. Where the New York Times, Reuters and Bloomberg actually got their information from was here. Evergrande representatives met with the affected bond investors in New York at 4 PM local time on October the 28th. In the talks, institutional creditors requested information on the status of real estate projects, liquidity, and asset valuations. The meeting ended without an official result, but with a commitment to make the interest payments. The result was published by the New York Times yesterday and taken up by the media as if the payments had already been made. However, this is not the case so far, as they just made a commitment. And therefore, so far, these big media sources like Reuters and Bloomberg are just basically playing he said, she said, and taking something that was said by somebody as fact of an actual payment. When in actual fact, nobody has confirmed the payment. Not the investors, not Evergrande, not the Hong Kong banks. No one. And therefore, Evergrande is very much still on the ropes of default and could actually have already defaulted, and it's just being covered up by Western media. And I also wanted to talk about how Evergrande actually got in this position in the first place and what it really means. 2/3 of China's top developers breach a red line on debt. Now, you may have heard me mention in one of my videos previously over the last few weeks about these 3 red lines that were implemented by the Chinese government that basically restrict and monitor the amount of debt that these Chinese property developers have. Well, the first red line is a 70% ceiling on liabilities to assets, basically meaning that they can't have liabilities exceeding 70% of their total assets. The second red line is a 100% cap on net debt to equity, basically meaning that net debt can't be larger than equity, which is the equivalent to share capital plus accumulated reserves and any share premium as well. And there's also a third red line of cash to short-term borrowing ratio, basically meaning that they have to have at least the same amount of cash as they have short-term borrowings, which is loans falling due within 1 year. There's then also a colour code here. Anyone in red has breached all 3 red lines, anyone in orange has breached 2 of the 3 red lines, anyone in yellow has breached at least 1 of the red lines, and anyone in green has got no breaches at all so far. So you can see here that Evergrande is in the orange with 2 breaches, China Railway Construction is also in the orange with 2 breaches, and Country Garden here is in the yellow with only 1 breach. There's also 3 companies here with red breaches, there's another 3 companies on top of the 2 already mentioned in orange, and there's a whole bunch here in the yellow. And 2/3 of the top 30 Chinese property firms by sales, ranked by the China Real Estate Information Corporation, have breached at least one of the metrics known as the 3 red lines. Developers are facing rising financial stress as stricter rules around the borrowing and deleveraging campaign by authorities weigh on the sector. A liquidity crisis in China Evergrande Group has roiled markets, with the nation's real estate sector making up almost half of the world's distressed dollar-denominated debt. You can see here, ranking those developers by size, Evergrande is definitely the largest, Country Garden up next, and then Vanke, China Railway Construction, and Greenland, among many others. And this is exactly why it's not just Evergrande that's in trouble here, it's Country Garden, China Railway Construction, Vanke, and many, many others, on top of those ones like Cynic that have already defaulted. And now I also wanted to talk about the true potential of the AMC Squeeze. There's been way too many posts where apes are coming out saying that the high floor is not feasibly possible. And these posts usually come in one of the following flavours. The number or the floor is way too high and it's unrealistic. The market cap of AMC just wouldn't make sense. And who is realistically going to pay that much per share? Or the US currency would become worthless if it did happen, or that there be some kind of government intervention. Now the first one is that the price is too high and that's unrealistic. Now obviously this is just a feeling or a personal opinion, and I think it really comes from not fully understanding what a legal obligation actually is. So if a hedge fund gets liquidated, legally they're obliged to buy back all of the shares that they had been shorted, as they have to close out of all of their positions during the liquidation process. Now obviously we know that hedge funds have legally shorted a lot of shares, but we also know that they've illegally shorted a lot of shares as well. They have to legally close out of both the legal shorts and the illegal shorts. So this post here gives the example of short hedge funds being legally obliged to buy back 100 million shares, but I don't really think that's a great example. So let's say there's a very, very large hedge fund like Citadel that gets liquidated and has to buy back 400 million shares all on their own. Now Citadel may well have many more shorted shares than 400 million shares. They may have at least double the float shorted just on their own. But obviously you're also going to have some other funds out there that are also illegally shorting AMC as well. Let's just assume that only one fund gets liquidated, which is Citadel, and they only have 400 million shares shorted. So therefore, Citadel are going to be legally obliged to buy back 400 million shares. They can't get out of it and purchase back less. They need to close out of their full position. Now, obviously, of that 400 million, they could probably buy back about 150 million of them from institutions at fairly low prices, maybe $100 a share or $200 a share. So that still leaves them with 250 million shares that they need to buy back. Maybe they could buy back another 50 million shares at, say, $420, maybe another 50 million at $690, and maybe another 50 million at $1,000 from the paper hands that sell earlier. That still leaves them needing to cover 100 million shares that, again, they can't get out of, and the market price of AMC is at $1,000 per share already. Maybe the next line of apes have got their sell price at $10,000 a share, and therefore maybe Citadel can get another 50 million shares at $10,000 per share, but they've still got 50 million shares left to cover. Now, even though at that point AMC would be at $10,000 per share, Citadel would still have to legally close out of another 50 million shares. Now, let's say there's nobody left out there that's willing to sell Citadel any more shares for anything less than $10,000 per share. Well, Citadel still have 50 million shares that legally need to be bought back. Now, to give you a real world example of how this might actually work, imagine that a billionaire is trapped in the desert with no way out. They're about to die from dehydration until you, a merchant, comes across them. Fortunately, you bought water bottles for $1.50 each at the previous city. The billionaire asks you for some water, and you say that you'll only sell it to them for $100 million per bottle. According to those people that say the price is too high and that it's unrealistic, a water bottle being sold for $100 million simply cannot happen because it's unrealistic. And maybe the billionaire turns around and refuses and says, nope, I'm not paying you $100 million for that bottle of water. I'd rather die of dehydration or wait for the next merchant to come along. Maybe the billionaire waits and waits and waits for a few merchants to come along. Maybe there's a few that do come along, and one says he'll sell him a water bottle for $1,000 per bottle. The second merchant says he will also sell him a water bottle, but this time for $2,000 per bottle. The third merchant says, I'll also sell your water bottle, but mine's going to cost you $10,000 per water bottle. And maybe there's a fourth merchant that says, I will also sell your water bottle, but mine is also going to cost you $100 million per bottle. And also there's no more merchants coming this way because that's all of them. The billionaire's then obviously going to buy the first water bottle, the second water bottle and the third water bottle for $1,000, $2,000 and $10,000. He's then got 3 water bottles, but that's probably not quite enough to keep him alive. Once he's then drank all of his water, he then has a life and death obligation to buy another water bottle for $100 million per water bottle because he's legally obliged, this time by life and death. And therefore, even though $100 million is an obscene price to pay for a water bottle, in that situation it might just happen to keep him alive. Now, so what about the market cap not making sense? Well, the market cap can temporarily increase to some ridiculous number, but then again, there's nothing unusual about that. During the Volkswagen squeeze, they also became the most valuable company in the world for a short time, even though the company itself was most certainly not worth that much. The price will come down after the squeeze to reflect the company's valuation. And in fact, not every single ape is going to be able to sell at the very, very peak at $100,000 per share, or $500,000 per share, or $1 million per share. Everybody plans to sell the very, very tippy top of the squeeze, but in pretty much every single circumstance, that's not going to happen, and they're going to sell before the squeeze is finished or after the squeeze has reached its peak. For example, let's look at DWAC and compare it to AMC. Maybe this is, say, $40 for AMC. AMC then runs up to $1,000 just here. It then pulls back to, say, $300 per share, and it then runs up through $10,000, $50,000, all the way to $500,000 per share, illustrated here by DWAC reaching $175. Now, obviously, everybody's plan is to sell right at the very top, right here at $175. Now, that obviously sounds very, very obscene because Citadel would need quadrillions of dollars to be able to buy back all of those shares. For Citadel to be able to buy back 2 billion naked shorted shares at $500,000 per share, they'd need literally trillions, if not quadrillions of dollars, which obviously does sound very unrealistic. But basically what I want to tell you is that most people did not sell right here at the very tippy top at $175 per share. Most people obviously sold in these few green candles here or in these few red candles here all the way back down. And to prove that, Gergavins posted a tweet. At $175 for DWAC, there was only one singular trade made. At $172, there was only 28 trades made, and at $171.95, there was only 5 trades made. And therefore, that's basically only 34 apes that could sell at the very, very top of the squeeze. The other hundreds of thousands of apes are going to sell before the top or after the top, on the way up or on the way back down. And I think that's the most important part, really. Yes, at the very top at $500,000 per share, it seems very, very unrealistic because it costs Citadel quadrillions of dollars. But maybe there's only going to be 34 apes that do sell at $500,000 per share, and the remainder of apes are going to sell at $100,000, $200,000, $50,000, $10,000 on the way up or on the way down. Now, I also wanted to talk about who exactly is going to pay. If the short hedge fund becomes insolvent and can't afford the shares at those rising price points, like $500 a share or $1,000 a share, then who is actually going to pay? Well, the prime broker will be obligated to buy back. In Citadel's case, it's Bank of America. And if they can't afford to pay it, then it will be the DTCC, its subsidiaries, and its members. Maybe there's also that SIPC insurance that kicks in as well, but mostly it will be the DTCC and its wider members, basically that insurance policy. And if ultimately they can't, then it may be up to the Fed to do so. They may decide to print a bunch of money or just have our names on the book with the amount of money that we're owed. Who knows? The point is, it's not our problem to solve for them. But again, as I just touched on, I don't really think this is the case because not all 400,000 apes are going to sell right at the very tippy top at $500,000 per share. Most apes are going to sell on the way up or on the way down. Guys, be sure to let me know down in the comments below what you think about Evergrande defaulting and the true squeeze potential of AMC. And if you haven't already, be sure to sign up to Moomoo to get those 3 free shares because at the end of the day, everybody loves free money. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some of my others. Alternatively, subscribe to the channel and ding the notification bell because that way you'll be alerted when I upload a new video. Cheers.